Hello, everyone. So this is our first video from our 2023 session of the Winter Zoom Embroidery Series. And for our first couple of classes, we are going to be learning some traditional stitches from Mexican embroidery. I am not an expert in this, nor am I Mexican. I took a class on some of these stitches, and I think they're very beautiful. Some of them are stitches that we learned last winter. We learned them by their English names. And sometimes they're done exactly the same, and sometimes the technique for using them is a little bit different. And we're also going to be learning some that are brand new, at least to me, and to our class here at the library. So I'm excited about these. We're going to start tonight with the most sort of well-known, at least well-known around here, type of embroidery, which is called otomi. So if you've seen like you often see it on shirts or tapestries, like it's big colorful flowers and birds and other types of animals, and they're done in like stripes of color, looks like this. So we're going to be doing our first stitch is this fill stitch from this type of otomi embroidery. It's also called Tenangos embroidery, and this is just the Tenangos stitch. It's the main stitch, to my understanding, that is used for this type of embroidery, and it is from the Hidalgo region of Mexico. So no matter which like template you decided to use, or if you decided to draw your own, we're going to be using this to fill some of our flower petals tonight. You can also use it to fill hearts. You can see over here, I've used it to do a heart in 2 different colors, and I've used it here in this little flower. The orange stitch is this Tenango stitch. Okay. And I'll show you that a little more closely. But no matter what template you chose, there's different types of flowers. This one, this shape, or the one that comes down to a point like that. Whichever you chose, this stitch is going to be great for that. It's going to be great for your bird feathers as well. So I'm going to show you this one, and then you can sort of just go to town filling in the shapes on your design. So the only difference, depending on your shape, is like where you start. So I'm going to give you a little diagram with a pen and a marker on how you get those started. But I'm going to go ahead and just make the switch to my overhead camera. Oh, one more thing. So this is the video from our first class, but I made a starter video where I go over things like loading the fabric into your hoop, how to thread your needle, how to organize your threads, and then a couple of basic, very, very basic stitches that are important to know if you're going to be doing any kind of other projects, or if you ordered an embroidery kit online, it's going to ask you to do a couple of stitches. So if you are brand new to embroidery and you didn't make it to class in person, go watch the starter video and then come back here. Okay, switch to this one. Perfect. Okay, so again, this is the Tenango stitch, and it's like these X's that are used to fill in large shapes. So again, that's here in the orange. This yellow is the satin stitch, which we are going to go over next week. It has a different name in Spanish, but if you've done the satin stitch, it's basically the same. So the satin stitch, you can turn this over and see the satin stitch uses a ton of thread because you get the same effect on the back. The Tenango stitch, on the other hand, you use almost no thread on the back. So this is a really economical way if you're covering big spaces. You'll use less thread. Also, if you're making like a shirt, you're not going to have all this scratchy thread on the back. So this is a really great fill stitch to know. So like I said, this stitch is made by sewing X's. So you can have a petal that ends in a point or a feather, or you know, this is this type of flower like this. Either one will work. So when I sew this, and what I learned in the class is that it's easier to sort of start at the pointed end or the flat end and work back towards yourself to the rounded end. And what we're going to do is we're going to be making these X shapes, and you sort of do it like a bow tie. Okay, so you're going to start over here. Let's say you're going to start in the left-hand corner if you're doing this style. You're going to come up, and you're going to draw your thread across over here. And then you're going to go through the fabric, come up, and then go back down, and then you're going to come back up here. So let's see my little bow tie shape there. So again, left, down, underneath, right, left, and then you're going to come up underneath. I'm going to show you this with a needle and thread as well, of course, so that'll make more sense. If you're starting with a pointed shape, it's sort of less easy to determine what's left and what's right. So you're going to start at the point here, and you're going to work sort of down this edge of your shape, okay? And then you're going to come up here and come down and make this X, okay? So just whatever you're working in, you're going to start what is either the left or at the point. All right, let's move to the fabric. It'll be easier to see what's going on. Okay. Now I've got my thread. When we did this in class, I showed you how to do it with a knot in your thread. Okay, so if you're a beginner, I would recommend using the knot. And for that, you will come up on the corner, pull this taut, and then we're going to come back down over here. Okay, and you remember if you were in class, you're always sort of checking your knot to make sure that it's taut for at least your first couple of stitches to make sure that you're not loosening up. It'll affect your tension and it'll get in your way. For this video, I'm going to do a more advanced starting technique. Whoops. Where we're not going to have a big knot on the back of our fabric. Again, this technique is often used for clothing, so you don't want all that knot and stuff on the back of your project that will be scritchy against your skin or will not look nice. So I cut off my knots. I'm going to show you the advanced technique, which we did not go over in class. So for that, everything's going to be on top of my fabric for this particular stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very tiny scoop of my fabric a couple times. You can see very tiny bits of fabric that I picked up with my needle. I'm going to pull this through. I'm going to leave a little tail here. I'm going to go back down because I'm starting from below just like I would if I had tied a knot. That doesn't change. But instead of a knot, I have this on top. So again, for this Tenangos stitch, I'm going to start in this left corner. Okay, whether or not you have a knot, you're starting your stitch from the bottom in this left corner. Okay, now, if I pulled on this in the direction that my little stitches went, I would pull this right out. But I'm pulling this way. I started my little line sort of perpendicular-ish to my stitch, so it's not going to pull out. Okay, started in the left corner. Now I'm going to start my bow tie X. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to do this wide. So do me a favor and watch this before you start. I'm going to start down here. I'm going to always working on my line that I've drawn for my petal shape. First line of my X. Okay. Now underneath, I'm going to come up for this first one. I'm going to come up in this top right-hand corner. Okay, now I'm going to do the other X of my bow tie. Back down on my line. Okay, now that was my first one. I work corner to corner. For my subsequent stitches, I'm going to come up under the one above it. Okay, so I'm coming up on my line, but I'm leaving a little space here and because I'm working wide so you can see what I'm doing, I'm just sort of splitting the difference here. So we'll just go with that for now. Okay. Now I'm just repeating. First line of my bow tie. Oops. Okay, I'm going to come down here on my line. First line of my bow tie. Now I'm going to come up here, splitting the difference. And I'm going to do that cross, the second cross of my bow tie. Come up on my line, splitting the difference. All right, I'm coming back down on my line, coming back up, splitting the difference. Okay, so I'm just going to keep across, up, down, up, down, up, down. I'm going to do this on paper. I'm going to come down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Look at all those bow ties. Okay. Now, I did this wide to show you sort of the mechanism of the stitch. Now I'm going to do it closer together the way you actually want to do it so that it looks nice. So now if you want to join in with me, if you want to go along with me, now's the time to start. So I'm coming up in my top left-hand corner, and I'm doing that first diagonal of my bow tie. And if you did this with me, you can now, because I've done so much crisscrossing here, there's no way this is going to come out. So I can get that out of my way. All right. First left to right of my bow tie. And this one I'm doing in the proper way for spacing. I'm going to keep this a little bit tighter. Okay. There's my diagonal. All right, from here to here. Now I'm going to come up above, right above my stitch, doing the second cross of my bow tie. But I'm going to keep this close because I want this to be a fill stitch. Now we're doing it right. Okay, so I'm still splitting the difference in this little tiny space right here. I just went down here. I'm going to come up there. Okay. All right, back left to right, coming down on my line, leaving a tiny space. Coming back up on my line. So I'm always coming back up, coming back up through my fabric just above where my previous stitch went in. So a little crisscross, going down on my line, coming back up just above where I went down. Okay, splitting the difference just above. Okay. So you can see that this is starting to really fill in. I could work this even tighter so that I wouldn't see the fabric at all. So to do that, I'm going to go practically, I mean, you can see how close this is. I'm going to leave the tiniest space. Teeny tiny space. And then I'm going to come up between. Okay. So I'm always following my line. I'm starting to get pretty narrow down here. No problem. I'm just going to keep following my line up and down on my line. And at some point, I'll just have to decide that I'm done. I don't want this to end in a point. I want it to feel rounded. Oops, I caught a loose fabric, a loose thread from my fabric there. I'm not going to worry about that for the sake of the video, but if I were doing this for realsies, I would back that thread out for sure because I don't like the way that looks. That's not nice. Okay, running out of room in my shape here, but I feel like I don't quite have the rounded edge look I'm going for yet. So I'm going to do another one and see what happens. And I'm gonna do one more. I think this will finish it off nicely visually. Oops, got my screw again here. Okay. All right, if it weren't for this little white thread here, I think that would look very nice. I'm going to trim this out of here so that it's not blocking our view. There we go. Okay, so that I've got a nice rounded shape that I was able to make by just making those crisscrossing straight lines. So now, because I'm trying not to get, this is from where I started when I switched techniques from the wide spacing to the narrow spacing. So you shouldn't have that. You should just have a little outline of your shape here. Because we don't want to knot this off. Now, if you want to knot it off because you're a beginner, go for it. I went over that in the starter video and in class. If you want to do the advanced technique, what you're going to do is you're going to go back through, coming up at some point on your line. Okay, and then I'm going to take eye first, and I'm going to thread. I'm just going to run, just like I'm doing a weaving or a whipping stitch, I'm going to run this under here. Now, if this whole thing was covered, I could come out anywhere. I would come up at least halfway through, maybe towards the end, and I can pull this out and do that. And that end thread, which is going to be long, is just going to hang out underneath that, okay? And that is how you keep that from coming out. If you want to be extra secure, what you can do, let's pretend this is my last stitch, is I can run my needle almost like it actually exactly like I'm doing a whip stitch. I can just sort of whip a few stitches here. These are so tiny, it's hard to get my needle under. But I can whip a few stitches, and then I can go under and do that thing where I hide the needle or hide the thread and cut it. Okay. All right, so that is a great way to not have any knots on the bag. It's a really good technique for if you are doing clothing and you don't want to have those knots against your skin. Now, it doesn't work with some of our line stitches that we've worked. So this is a really good thing. You want to do this when you have a fill stitch. Okay. All right. I'm really quickly going to actually show you with a needle and thread how to get started if you have a point, because it's a little tricky and I just want you to see it in action. Same exact stitch. It just starting it out on a point is a little different. And this time I'm going to do it with a knot just for the sake of keeping this video a little shorter. Okay. So I've tied a knot. I'm going to come up on the corner. We're calling this corner my top left. All right, I'm going to come down at a diagonal, same as I did with my bow tie. I'm going to come down top left to bottom right and make a diagonal stitch. Okay. Now, I'm not going to pull this tight so you can see where I come back up. I'm going to come back up here, splitting the difference. Okay. Now I'm going to do the second diagonal line of my bow tie where I come back down X shape on the line. Again, just so you can see, I'm not going to pull that yet. I'm going to come back up, splitting the difference. Okay. Now I'm going to come back again. I'm going to start my second bow tie, diagonal line, coming down on my line, left to right, and again, splitting the difference. Okay, second diagonal, but I'm keeping them close. So because my shape is widening in different ways, it's not as exact up here. But I'm gonna do my second diagonal on my line, right to left, split the difference. gonna keep coming back down. So now I'm gonna, if I keep going like this, it's really gonna even itself out, and I'm gonna get a more sort of uniform crisscrossing shape once I get here. It's just working your way through this point that it gets a little bit wonky, but that is the way that it is done. Okay, now I want to show you in this illustration that I had that I showed you before of these birds. If you can see here, it's hard to see in the video, but this bird, I don't know how big this is in real life, but this bird, this is a wide spot. And so the bird was split into two sections. And then a column of Tenangos was done here, and a column of Tenangos was done here. If you get really wide stitches, they're going to be they're going to like get snagged on things. They're going to come loose in the wash. So you want to keep this Tenangos stitch no more than like 1/2 inch wide. So this is what is too wide. This is too wide. So what I would really want to do here is, even if this is my petal shape, I would want to come in and split this and actually work my stitch here all the way down. Once that's done, come back up here and work this one all the way down. If you're working the same color or different colors, you want to, the same way we're sort of splitting the difference here, when you work your second column, if you can, you want to try to get the right hand edge of your left column to intersect this way with the right hand edge of your right column. I'm sorry, the left hand edge of your right column. So I've got another drawing to sort of illustrate how that works. Okay, and so that's here, is that you want to have those sort of work in between each other. Okay, so again, you want your columns for this Tenango stitch to be 1/2 inch or smaller, especially if it's going to go on clothing. If it's going on a wall hanging like this or something that's not going to be functional, you can do it a little bit wider. Okay, it's really just a matter of it not getting snagged and stuff like that. So that is the Tenango stitch. So I would say on your design, whatever you're doing, if you've got, like, this has a ton of spaces where you could put in some Tenangos. Fill in some of those. We're going to do the satin stitch next week, which is a nice contrast to have like this sort of crisscrossy with the satin, the nice smooth. These are from two different traditions, but we're for this class, we're mixing them. So if you want to have some nice textural contrast, don't do all of your sections. But if you want to fill in a lot of your rounded sections with the Tenangos in the next couple of weeks, go for it. We are going to do a different fill stitch for your straight areas, the house, the chevron, if you went with the block lettering. So don't fill those in, but you can fill in your heart, which you can split into two, like I did here, and fill in all of those rounded shapes. But save your straight edged shapes for later. And also, if you have a stem that has tiny leaves, save those. So it's just these bigger shapes. Okay. All right. So now we are going to move into a couple of different line stitches. So we have here this. See how tiny, this is actually the Tenango stitch done very small. Okay. And then this is what we know as the chain stitch, but it is called the Paso Atras, okay, which actually means step back stitch. No, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is called we call it the chain stitch in Spanish, or it might actually be a native language. I'm so sorry. It's called the zoom stitch, Z-U-M, which means cord stitch. So we're going to do that one first, and then I will show you a second line stitch. Okay. Here we go. So this is it. This is our cord stitch here. We call it the chain stitch. You can kind of see why it's called a chain stitch, because it's like chain links that are linked together. If you do it very, very small, it looks more like a braid. So this is a tension decision that you get to make if you want it to be a wider loop or a tighter braid. Okay, so for that, I'm going to grab my heat erasable pen and I'm going to work on a curved line. Okay. I'm going to grab my thread. And for this one, we are going to knot your thread. Okay. So if you've done the chain stitch before, it's likely that you learned how to start it a different way and it's sort of worked differently. I really like this way that I've learned in this class. So to start it out, we're going to start with a tiny anchor stitch at one end. It doesn't matter which end you start at. Okay. So my anchor stitch is going to follow my line. So I'm going to start up here. I'm working from you want to start away from yourself and you're going to work towards yourself. So I'm going to do a tiny anchor stitch. And if it would help, you can take another needle and you can lay that needle down perpendicular to your line. So my line goes this way. I'm going to lay my needle down here. I'm going to go back down on my line and make this little anchor stitch to start. Now, I'm going to leave that there for a second. You don't have to do this, but it can be a little helpful. All right, now I'm picking my stitch length. Okay, I'm going to do a big stitch length so it's easier for you to see. I'll do a stitch length that's similar to this. This was about half of the stitch length. Okay, so I'm going to go about that big. If you want this braided effect, do a shorter stitch length. Okay, so I've done my anchor stitch. I'm coming up on my line from the bottom. Pull this taut, check my knot. Always check your knot. That's good. Okay, now I'm going to gently pull out this little guide needle and I'm going to run my other one right through that little tunnel that I make. I'm not penetrating the fabric. I'm just going through that little anchor stitch loop. Okay, I'm going to pull that tight and then I'm going to go in through the same hole that I came up or right next to it, as close as I can get. And I think I felt myself pull on this a little bit. Yeah, so I'm going to pull that tight. All right, so that was my first one. Now, if you want to have this big open look, you can loosen this up a little bit. So I've got more of a loopy loop. Okay, now that's it. Now I'm just going to come down, same stitch length, going to come down here, come up. Okay, so I got to be careful if I want to leave these loose with my tension. Came up one stitch length through on my line. I'm going to go underneath the entire thing now. I went through my anchor stitch the first time. This time I'm going through that whole chain. Okay, I'm going to go back down the same place. That's that. I'm just going to keep going on my line. And like anything, if you're working on a curve, smaller stitches are usually visually more pleasing. So if I was doing like a little circle, I would absolutely be wanting to do these tiny stitches. It'll just read better visually. That's that. I'll do one more. Again, if you want that braided look, pull these loops tight. Slipping my needle underneath that chain. Okay, that's that. So when I want to finish it off, I'm just going to knot off like I normally do. I'll do that real quick here. Underneath my closest stitch, through the hoop. There we go. That's a knot. And if I want to be extra careful, I can do it twice. Okay, we'll give that a little trim. All right, now we're going to do the stitch that I said first. which was that step back stitch, the Paso Atras, which is here. And if you did class with us last time, or if you've done embroidery, you'll know as the stem stitch. I think the step back stitch is actually a much better name for it. And you'll see why in a moment. Okay, here we go on the step back stitch. Here's my line. Okay. For this one, I'm also going to start away from myself and work back towards myself. Got my knot in my thread. I'm going to come up at the end. Okay. If you're a beginner, this one might feel a little bit tricky, but bear with me. Okay, I've got my knot taut against the back of my fabric. Okay, I'm going to choose my stitch length per the norm. I'm going to go a little bit bigger so that you can see. I'm going to go down it back into the fabric, 1 stitch length. Now I'm going to leave this big loop here. Okay, I'm not pulling this tight yet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up on my line, splitting the difference, just like we did before, actually. I'm going to come back in the middle. Now, I'm going to make a decision right now. My loop is going to be on the left and my needle is going to come up on the right. If I prefer to go the other way, I can. But whatever I decide, I'm going to stick with it for the entirety of my line. I'm going to do loop on the left, needle on the right. Pull that taut. Now I'm going to come forward again. Okay, so now I'm going to come forward 1 stitch length, same as before. And that's 1 stitch length from where my thread's coming out. Going back down, oops. Okay, and again, I've made the decision that my loop is going to be on the left. I'm going to come back up here. Now, I'm splitting the difference, but this time it's really easy to do because I'm going to come up right next to where my other stitch ended. Okay, that's splitting the difference of this one. I'm going to do that for the rest of the line. Okay, there I go. Pull that tight. Now, I'm going to come forward 1 stitch length. Loops on the left. Needle comes up where my last stitch ended. Pull that over, needle on the right. All right, one more time. Down 1 stitch length. Pro move here. You can come back up on your line in 1 move. You don't have to go all the way through and all the way back. Loops on the left, threads on the right. I'm going to do that one more time with the pro move. Needle down, needle up. Down on my line, up on my line. Loops on the left, threads on the right. Okay. So that is the step back stitch or the stem stitch. Now you can, I don't know if you'll be able to tell in the video, but on the one I had done before, yeah, I don't think you can really tell. The smaller your stitch length, the shorter your stitch length, the more this is going to look like a tightly woven rope. It's going to sort of have more lift off of the fabric. It's going to have a higher profile off the edge of your fabric. If you do a bigger stitch, it's not going to look as ropey, and you're going to sort of see it like pixelated lines as opposed to a very continuous line here. So short stitch length, big stitch length. Okay, and then when you get to the end of your line, I'm coming out this one, right? I'm coming out in between because I'd come back up. I'm just going to go, instead of coming a full stitch length down like I'm doing another stitch, I'm just going to go in here in the same place. Okay. And do my knot off on the back. So that is that. Again, I would say have fun in the next couple of weeks until we meet again. And any rounded shapes that you have, you can not save your circles for me. But like your butterfly petal, your butterfly wings, your flower petals, your hearts, if you want to split those to do that Tenangos fill stitch, that's great. Your stem of your flowers, or if you had cursive text, you can do that in either one of these. You can do the step back stitch or the cord stitch. So So I would say just have fun. We are going to be doing one more fill stitch. So maybe save a couple of petals or a couple of your small hearts for that satin stitch. And then we'll also be doing this square fill and some stars next time. Okay. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.